Good evening, everybody. How's everybody doing? I would first like to thank you all for coming to see us again. I know we saw many of you in December, and we've done a lot of work since December based on your input. And for those of you that are new, this is the last public engagement short of the council meeting that we will have time for input from the public related to our Resilient Coastal Communities Program, Phase 3. Now, we've gone through Phase 1 and Phase 2, and VHB, who's our team here, we have Ricky Wyatt to my right, and we have J.D. Hines to my left, and then we have Paige Dickerhoff, who's been our public engagement guru. They're going to basically walk you through what we've done over the past 3 months, and some of the stuff is going to be technical. So if you have questions while they're going through, don't hesitate to raise your hand. But I would ask that you wait for the mic to come around so that we can hear what you're saying on the video that's being recorded for those that cannot be here today. We will have this posted tomorrow or in the next few days so that those that weren't able to make it can see what occurred. I don't want to take up too much of their time, so without further ado, I'll turn it over to JD and Ricky.
Go ahead. I'll just lead it. Hey, good evening, everyone. J.D. Hines with VHB. I'm the civil engineer of this team, practicing water resource engineer for about 20 years, and part of VHB's core coastal resiliency focused group. I've been in front of you before a couple times. It's nice to see everybody again. Thank you for coming out, and thank you for having us. And I'll let these two introduce themselves too. But or you just want to take it and run with it, or?
We're a casual group down here. We have presented, but so I'm Ricky White, a landscape architect with VHB, and
I'm Paige Dickerhoff. I'm a planner with VHB doing the public engagement.
We're excited to be here for this project as well as some of our other projects. The brick project is coming up, so we're just excited to continue. We've got public safety building in the future as well. So this is one of the many great projects y'all have going on. So I'm just going to give a quick overview of the project, where we are today and the goals, and then really let JD get into what y'all want to hear about the proposed solutions and things that were the menu of solutions that we have. So we're a world of acronyms, the RCCP, Resilient Coastal Communities Program. We are currently in the Phase 3 of that program, which is it's a program led by the NC Division of Coastal Management. And so the town was successful during the Phase 2 in receiving the grant that funded this portion of it. So the goal after this phase is to move into the implementation, Phase 4. So if we have some options today that everybody likes and that we agree on, and we can look at the funding sources and then apply for that additional funding for Phase 4. So again, Phase 3 is really the planning phase at the community level. And we were here earlier meeting with many of you back in December, and one-on-one and toured the neighborhoods and saw a lot of the one-on-one. We had the open house. So we identified the 5 study areas, and then we were really learning at that point. And so now this phase of the project, we're now kind of telling you what we learned and what we're proposing as solutions.
I just want to commend you. I do a lot of public engagement, and I've had so much engagement in this community, and so that's a good job to you guys. You're very involved, and I think your town staff very much so appreciate it. So just kind of give you an overview of what we've done already. So Phase 1, we came and we had those 5 community meetings with you guys. You all came out and voiced your concerns about your communities, and then we had the open house at the end of that just to hear from all of you, and that was about 50 people, which was great. And then in addition to that, we had the virtual aspect, which we got over 80, I think it was 85 comments, which is, I mean, how many people are here throughout the off season? That's huge. So that was very exciting to get that feedback from you all, and it was very helpful to build the next stages and the next steps. And that's when we came back. We took what we heard. We put it into the machine, which is JD, and came out with solutions. And that's when, if you remember back in February, we shared a potential, like a plethora of menu of solutions so you could look through, and then a survey, which we got 96 responses from that, which was great, just to, get a feeling for what was important to you when you had choices between different solutions. And now we're here today to kind of give you a narrowed down menu of solutions and really present our final findings. So I'll turn it to JD for those.
Thanks, Paige. So we came to the town council meeting and presented some of the similar stuff. I'm kind of going to go over it again for everybody or people that weren't at that meeting. But so a lot of the solutions here, you have low-lying topographic area. You have a low elevation relative to sea level or relative to groundwater here. So that's a huge constraint for any design of any type of stormwater facility. And the thinking we find generally for a lot of homeowners and others are, let's build up to get out of the water. Well, that's kind of reverse thinking for what we're trying to do in build resilient communities these days for flooding. It's more of, hey, where can we recess more areas so that we can control where the puddles of water go during certain rain events, or how the water gets out during a major event like a hurricane or nor'easter down here. So we did get a geotechnical report done with this project to figure out, is there anything wrong with the soils in certain locations? We heard from you all that water is standing for longer than a couple of weeks. The report back from the geotech basically said that groundwater elevations are pretty low, and when the borings were done, it was after a pretty dry period, so they're at like elevation 1.5, and your lowest topography in North Duck is elevation maybe 6. So that's pretty good separation from groundwater for water to not be able to get off of the surface. We think what the problem is in some of those areas where water's ponding is you just need some maintenance of some of the natural debris that have fallen in these low-lying areas over time from the trees and plants and things like that. It just need to be sort of scrape the surface off or scrape the upper crust off of the sandy layer to help that perk again. But we try to provide some solutions for all of this at the homeowner level, then at the community or neighborhood level, and then also at the town-wide level too, in terms of the scale of the solution and maybe where the funding could come from for them. And we added construction costs into the matrices here and life cycle costs, and did a cost-benefit analysis as part of this study. And you'll see all of that in these spreadsheets that are folded up at the top of the maps around the room. So the solutions that we've provided are state NCDEQ standard solutions. So they do provide some water. They provide water quantity, which is what you all are concerned with is flooding. They also provide a water quality benefit, a calculatable or quantifiable water quality benefit that you all can take or the town can use in terms of a water quality nutrient bank, which is a good thing. We're quality and quantity are inherently connected with projects, so we can't really help one without helping the other or hurt one without hurting the other. But bioretention cells are basically planted areas at the surface, but they're recessed instead of mounded, and there's an engineered soil mix and stone beneath the surface that acts as like a bathtub or a storage area for rainwater temporarily after a storm. But they look just like a landscape bed on the surface, but you'll see them, they'll be recessed. There's a lot of them in and around the town hall building here too. If you walk around, you can see them. And there's a lot in some homeowners' front yards we've noticed too around the neighborhoods with our several tours we've had with our lovely tour guides, Sandy and Jim. Dry pond is a little more unsightly at the surface, but gives you a lot more storage volume per square foot of area. It can be a grassed area that could be used during dry times for kids to play in, or whatever. You can some people put playgrounds on the surface of these even and just let it during a flood event. It's inundated with water, but then after the flood event, it's usable again. Obviously there's some maintenance costs with that, but dry ponds are a good solution, and it looks like lawn on the surface. Treatment swales are like a linear dry pond. Basically, they're going to flank the roadways where you have enough right-of-way or leased or easement area rather, to where you've got existing pavement that might be 25 feet wide, and you've got a total right-of-way or easement area that's 40 or 45 feet wide, flanking the roadway, putting swales there. Even if you have to put entrance culverts at every entrance location or every driveway location, still provides you more volume of storage for any given rain event. Permeable pavers, there's a lot of different types, and I was just talking to a few folks earlier. the paver costs up front for construction and the maintenance costs are sort of inversely proportional. If you pay a lot for permeable pavers, which is the picture in the upper left here, it looks like a standard paver that you'd see out here, but there's actually gaps between them to let the rainwater infiltrate through. That's going to be your most costly up front, but your least costly for maintenance. You see permeable concrete. I think somebody's saying that the Lowe's down here has permeable concrete out in front of it, and that's something sort of in the middle cost range for construction and in the middle cost range for maintenance. And then there's pervious asphalt as well. So there's a lot of options there, but you got to consider the life cycle cost when you're trying to decide which one of those to move forward with. But there's a storage area underneath of all of those of stone that acts like, again, like the bioretention acts like a bathtub below grade to help store the rainwater. Rain barrels or rainwater harvesting systems, there are grants available to homeowners to get these installed for free. There's pricing for these that we have in our study. I know there was some negative feedback about these, and I'd love to hear more about that from you all after we give the presentation here. I have one of these on my house, and I use it, so I'm interested to see what you guys have to say about it. But I got mine for $50, and it was subsidized by the Elizabeth River Project, near my house. So they can be a mosquito breeding habitat, and if you're not reusing the water because you're not at the house a lot during the year, then they could become problematic, and maybe that's what the issue is if you're not all live-in tenants or live-in owners all year long. So wet retention ponds, we left this in here. We do not have one specified yet, but any dry pond that we have designed can become a wet pond if you just have to dig that dry pond down deeper and actually pick up the groundwater elevation. So a dry pond might be if the ground elevation is 6, it might be from 6 down to 4 at the bottom. So you got 2 feet of storage there. Well, a wet pond, if the groundwater is at elevation 1.5, that wet pond bottom would need to be a few feet lower than 1.5 to keep a constant wet surface area within the limits of the basin. And they could be nicer. You can put fountains in them. They can become a neighborhood amenity, but they take up more space than a dry detention facility. And then there's also the neighborhood level risk of kids or something, playing in there or whatever, somebody falling in and becoming hurt or whatever. But so it's a good solution. We did not find a good application for it here, but we left the details of it in the report. So I'm going to go through these pretty quick, but these are basically the 5 study areas. So I'm going to go through these pretty quick, but these are basically the 5 study areas of the 5 maps you see around the room here, and I'll go through them here and just mention a couple of things. I mean, what you see is as a green shade is where we think there are septic systems, and we should not be planning any solutions. So you'll see a green hatched area on all of these maps. The blue hatches are the solutions, and they're keyed as an SCM number 1A, 2, 3, whatever, and that's keyed back to the spreadsheet that shows the costs per each solution and which neighborhood it falls within and all of those details. The yellow area is the study area, is our focus area. We have solutions in and out of that area because the study area is the lowest topographic area, but if you can catch the rainwater upslope of that, you can help reduce the flooding in the low area itself too. So pretty much you'll see every cul-de-sac, we've got a 3-tiered solution there with a dry swale around the perimeter, permeable pavers where the trash trucks and the emergency vehicles need to circulate the cul-de-sacs, and then a bioretention in the middle, which could have a tree or pampas grass or a nice feature in it, some vegetation to help soak up the water too. We tried to define the neighborhood boundaries as well as possible. If there's feedback from you all where we missed something there, please let us know and we'll adjust the line types as needed. Let's flip through these. We tried to also inlay the emergency pump locations. When you've got, I think it's 15 inches of depth of rainwater, or something that emergency vehicles cannot drive through. The town is allowed by the state to bring out emergency pumps and pump that water down to the ocean, but that's not something that can be done except for an emergency situation today. But we laid those in because those are important, because if that's where the emergency pumps are going during a storm, those also correspond to your lowest lying areas and your homes most at risk, right, and near those areas. So you guys aren't going to be able to see this, but this is the spreadsheet, and we call this a DSS. Like Ricky said, we love our acronyms, Decision Support System. So this is these tables are organized. There's 3 different tables on each figure here. The first table is really, the neighborhood that the solution falls within, the SCM number to correspond to the map, so you can find the location of that, which street it's on or near, so you can help geolocate it. And then we start getting into some of the numbers in here, like square foot area of the solution, the total volume of rainwater storage each of the solutions provide, and then a cost per volume. So on the far right, there's a column for, how much is the cost per square foot of facility, so that you can decide, and there's total costs in there too, but it help you all decide, or help you and the town decide which of the solutions to implement, and some of them have benefits. Some solutions are saying get rid of a tennis court completely, get rid of a parking area completely, and replace it with a stormwater solution. Well, if you replace that parking with a dry pond, you don't have any more parking, you've lost parking, and that's a detriment, and maybe a deal breaker. But if you replace that parking with permeable pavers, then you get the benefit of the stormwater facility, but it's at a higher cost, right? So that's for you all to decide. We're just trying to, again, put together the menu of solutions for you all to discuss further. The second table on this is a rain barrel assessment. So we tried to pinpoint how many units or lots are in each neighborhood, and figured out, even if every home has to add a gutter system to pick up the rainwater, and then 4 rain barrels, 1 on each corner of the home, to pick that up, what type of benefit is that, and what type of cost benefit is it? Well, the cost of it's actually really high relative to a lot of the other solutions, which I was surprised to see. We hadn't really analyzed this in this way before. This is sort of new. But they are pretty expensive. So if they're not subsidized, or you're not getting them, cheaper than market rate, then it's probably, it's still a great solution at a homeowner scale and the right thing to do, but it's not the most cost-effective solution as a whole. They are, yeah. So we assume $10,000 a house, which is a pretty safe number to gutter a 2,000 square foot footprint house, and then 1 rain barrel for each corner.
So one of the homeowners was asking, so I just Googled a grant.
Yeah.
That's eligible.
Can you hear me? I just want to make sure that the people that are viewing this after today heard that they want to ask whether the gutters were included in this cost, and JD said yes.
Yes.
So earlier we were talking about the cisterns and asking about grants, and JD mentioned that, and so I was over here Googling and looking, because I knew what in Virginia where some of them were. And so the one I quickly found was the North Carolina Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. It's called the Cost Share Program, CCAP, but we can give you details. But just for example, they're covering 75% of the actual cost of the system, so including installation, gutters. So that's one program. And they also, and this is common to what we have in Virginia as well, where they'll pay by the gallon. So if you've got a smaller than 1,000 gallon tank, they have a flat rate. But if you go bigger than that, they give you $1.56 per gallon plus the actual cost of installation. So there's programs out there. I mean, we do think it's a great solution, but as JD said, if we went out there and said every homeowner go buy a rain barrel, we know that's not feasible, but the programs are out there and a great solution. Got another question.
If you can just state your name.
Rosemary Gordon, and I'm on Amy Lane. It's across the street from Plover. And I'll just say, I applied for that grant. I was told I was a really good candidate. A year later, I'm still waiting. And they had come out, they assessed, they said the front of my house was applicable. They said I could probably get up to 75% for a system that would hold up to 250 gallons. So in the meantime, I've put 1 rain barrel on each other side of the house.
Good.
But I'm still waiting for the grant to come through.
Yeah.
We do.
Just thought I'd let you know.
Yeah. So, I mean, and so that may be a concern or comment with the grant program. I mean, I was telling one of the individuals earlier, this is becoming much more popular here regionally. It was a bigger thing on the west coast of the United States, as you know, they've were a little ahead of us on that, and we're catching up. So I think some of these grant programs may be inundated with everybody trying to get on board, but it's something I wouldn't give up on. I mean, but it is important. But we can look at other programs as well.
I'm pretty close to the end of the formal piece here anyway, so, and then we can talk a lot more, or we can take more formal questions if you guys would like, but I just want to hit that we did add maintenance costs, so there's a maintenance cost for each one of these solutions, and it's got, there's a list of maintenance requirements for all these facilities that the state puts out, but they don't put a cost to it. We took the same terminology and items that they specify in with their stormwater spec of what to expect for maintenance, and have added some cost figures to them. But not all of them are on an annualized basis or broken down annually. Some of them are replace a cracked pipe or whatever that might look like. We've got some budget costs in there. So if you take some of these on, you will have the maintenance costs sort of in your back pocket, or at least a close barometer to get you some funding of what you might need to repair any of these facilities. And then, the online survey results, which were uploaded, or the survey was uploaded 6 weeks ago, roughly, and then closed out maybe 3 or 4 weeks, 2 weeks ago, something like that. A lot of good response on there on the SurveyMonkey app over the web. That's really good, really cool that everybody took the time to respond. But pretty much everybody was a high percentage of support for swales and dry ponds, high percentage of support for bioretention and permeable pavers, which is what we have, and these are nature-based solutions, which is really what you want on a homeowner and residential scale. But most folks did not support the rain barrel system. So like I said, that's just interesting. And to me, every little bit helps. And I get it. Sometimes they're a nuisance if they fill full of water. And if you're not able to reuse the water, they could be problematic. But they do make them with overflow, so water shouldn't back up on the roof, or it shouldn't cause any other issues if they do take on too much water and the water's not being reused as hoped. With that, I'll close it and ask for questions. Again, thank you for having us back here. And it's been a really fun ride for 3 rounds of in-person meetings and lots of site tours. And we even had a really good tour one day when it rained pretty good down here. I don't think anybody will argue that there's more frequent flooding for everybody that lives near the coast, and we're dealing with it in, all up and down our VHB's footprint. We're an East Coast-based firm, so this is something that's front of mind for us and something we want to dig in and help with as much as humanly possible. Yeah, again, thank you.
I got a question in the back from Jim Gould.
Just to remind everyone here that we will have this available through YouTube on our Ducktown website. So if you wanted to share that information that was just presented later on to your respective property owners associations, it's 22 minutes now. It's not too difficult and too long to watch for the rest of your community to get a good understanding. So.
Fran Newman, Soundsea Village. On the map, what does the HP and the LP stand for? There's no legend.
High point and low point. So there's contours on these maps, but you can't. They're kind of small and tough to read. So we've tried to map where the high point of the topography in that area and the low point of the topography are.
Thank you.
And the floods in red is where we heard from homeowners, like in our last round of public meetings, people said, I live right here and we've got a flood. So we tried to mark that down and everywhere we were told. So that's what we've carried forward on the maps also.
You mentioned the green was, on the maps was sewage? Septic?
There are a couple properties that we had old aerials and that may have been developed, but we were told at the last meeting, oh, there's a house being built there, or there's a future house there. So I think some of it might have been, we put a placeholder, don't propose anything. So if it's green, that means we can't propose a solution there. So some of them might be over top of a house. We know that there's not a septic drain field over top of the house, but it was more of a placeholder for us to know don't put a solution there.
Oh, okay, because they're all septic.
This is Dave's house now.
Yeah. It's a septic field.
And really that legend was really for more of the condos, and we understand that every private house has a septic field, drain field. But it was really like the duck blind villas, understanding where theirs is, and Georgetown, where
Ocean
Sands,
Pines.
where those community drain fields are, because those are not as apparent. And so obviously, we don't want to propose a solution on top of a drain field.
Dave Stormont at Soundsea Village. As solutions come to light, is this going to try to be a one-size-fits-all, like one solution will fit all of the different neighborhoods, or can different solutions apply to different neighborhoods?
Well, I personally think that, like, take the cul-de-sacs, for example. Like right now, you've got traditional cul-de-sacs on all the roads, or at the end of all the roads, or some are in line, or just offline with the actual pathway of the road. You could take all of those and take every cul-de-sac and make it a permeable paver system, and instead of mounding it and pushing that water, you know, that's typical for roadways to be built that way. I mean, but it's at the crown in the middle, so that the high point of that cul-de-sac is in the middle of the pavement, and the low points are at the verge of the cul-de-sac and homeowner's property, and then that creates, like, the homeowner's properties are coming down and the cul-de-sac's coming down, and the flood areas are then right at the end of your driveway, or the ponding areas right at the end of your driveway. If you recess the entire cul-de-sac and make it permeable pavers, and then put a bioretention in the middle or something else to help kind of drink the water down, plants to drink the water down, I think that would be, you could do that at every cul-de-sac, and you'd have a good, once you do one, you know, you'd have a pretty good understanding at that point too of current, I mean, construction costs fluctuate a lot. We've got some budgetary costs in these to help with some grant funding assistance and some numbers to be used, but anybody that's doing construction projects right now or building anything knows that it's been pretty volatile over the past couple of years coming out of the pandemic here. So, and it's starting to settle, but it's still, you know.
Who would we talk to if we want to customize for our particular neighborhood in a section of our neighborhood? Looking at your map, those of us who've lived in this neighborhood for decades know exactly where the water ponds and where it doesn't. And some of your areas inside, in this particular case, inside the yellow line, if y'all were taking drillings in those areas, you're hitting a high point. You need to concentrate on the low points. So my question would be, who would I talk to about maybe just doing some sort of swale systems along the three major roads that run east-west in this particular neighborhood?
My response might be Sandy to start, but
Thanks,
but you
JD.
could call me. I mean, you could call us and we can help with that. We're doing a lot of work down here, as we mentioned before, which we're really appreciative of. We can help out with neighborhood scale retrofits too, doing the final design or some type of design build effort with a contractor, most certainly. So there's a few hidden, you know, potential landmines out there with some of these solutions, like utility infrastructure. We have not mapped all the underground utilities, but you guys probably have a pretty good understanding of where those are too. And if you do the final engineering design, you pick those up and know that there may be a relocation cost that needs to be added. So,
One thing to add to your first question about, is there one thing that was for each spot? But we were talking again earlier, a lot of it is a series of things. So the rain barrels can help, the swales can collect water and then take that water to the cul-de-sac or around the cul-de-sac, we do the swales. So it's in most situations, it's not just one item that will solve it. It's a series. Every little thing adds up to make the big thing. I mean, and we don't have the real estate or the area to do, you know, like JD said, a level 1 wet pond, which can capture a ton of real estate. So instead, we need a lot of little things to add up to that level 1 wet pond.
And I would like to reemphasize something we did back in December. A lot of the low-lying areas, we are going to be very limited. So that's why some of the solutions you'll see in these maps are not in the focus area, because if we don't stop it upstream, there's no way to really prevent it downstream. And so some of the, I know I got some calls like, why are you suggesting something that's higher than where the low point is? Well, the higher, if we can put it in the ground and give it time to infiltrate in these higher areas, then there might be the possibility that it won't flood the lower areas. Now, in extreme events, obviously, that's not going to be the case, but Mary Ann's ahead of you.
Hi, no, that's fine. Hi, guys. Mary Ann Quinn. I'm also at Sound Sea Village. I mean, these are all great ideas, and I guess my main question is, we have these solutions in the long term. Are they optional? Are they going to be required? And you know, who's going to pay for all of this? Will it be the homeowners? Will it be a combination of the different communities and perhaps the town of Duck?
Yes, everything is optional, because this study is for the community, and we're not requiring anybody to do anything. Now, there's certain levels where we get to a point where if the town is paying for private infrastructure to be fixed to get through, then there's a different discussion altogether. But for the most part, this is a study designed to help us find solutions that can be implemented either individually by a homeowner or by a community or with assistance from the town and funding. So you got this kind of like this triangle going up where individual owners can do this, the community can do this, and the town can do this. So everything's going to be optional. Funding has to be found. We can't get to funding until we know what the solutions are. And right, like Dave says, who do I talk to about putting swales in? Well, this is the first part of it. We now know kind of where the cost runs, have to design that, then we look for funding.
Okay.
So
So there might be funding available.
sure.
Okay.
I don't know when or where, but
Yeah. I can say mine.
That was my question, too. I was just wondering. Donna Krieger, Sand Dollar Shores. That was my question also, like if you're putting a swale up our street, is that our HOA's responsibility or is that the town?
so we have to make a distinction between private and public roads. So private roads is going to be a little more difficult because I can't ask the state for money or help. State roads, we can certainly do that. Now, we all know NCDOT. They don't have a lot of money. The road raising project we're doing without funding from them. So that funding pocket is there, but whether or not we can actually get them to assist will be seen. I don't know. I wouldn't count on it, but again, the same thing would apply. Individual, community, town. Come on, you gotta have more questions than that. Jim Gould.
But I think tonight you have your comment sheets. I think we got a pretty good understanding on your comment or from comments from previous meetings where the flooding is and where potential solutions could occur. But now is your opportunity to really, pick out the ones you really want to see. Whether that's your personal interest or if you're the leader of a community tonight, you can make that decision from a larger perspective, but really focus in and pick out the ones that you think are the best and then be able to present that back to your community. It's a great opportunity.
And I would say that, we have a draft report that is not here right now.
It's here digitally.
It's here digitally that we can print out. Should we print it out?
It's couple hundred pages total, because it has
Yeah.
some appendices.
I knew there was a reason why I didn't
It has
print
some
it.
backup data in there, but the important, there's 10 pages of data that are the most important, which are the 5 maps, one for each study area, and then the 5 decision support system spreadsheets. Those 10 pages are really the meat and potatoes of the report, so.
So I think one of the keys and the purposes of tonight's meeting was to see if there's anything that you see in these maps that is a no way. We don't want to see that in our community. Or is there something that jumps out and you're like, that's kind of where we're thinking. so that we can figure out if this report we've got drafted to go to council in May, is there anything that's really off base? Because we're relying on the information we got from you that we translated to a report and these maps. So that's really, if you want to fill out a comment, you don't want to say it out loud, that's fine. But, you know, the feedback we get tonight is going to help us make sure we're sending the right things to council in May.
James Cofield. I guess my primary concern is more for major events like Matthew. And in my neighborhood, that's where the real issue surfaced. So my question is, with respect to major events, and it doesn't seem like there's a focus or the depth for solutions for major events. Are there communities across the country, save maybe California, because they're environmentally concerned in California, are there other communities where, and particularly in North Carolina, where they've been able to get public funding to solve some of these issues?
So a couple points here. The type of facility that you would need to completely absolve you of any flooding during a Hurricane Matthew would wipe out a quarter of your neighborhood homes to build the facility to have the volume to store that amount of water. So, and that's not feasible, obviously, right? But just to give you kind of something to wrap your brain around in terms of order of magnitude, it would be a quarter of each neighborhood, 25% of the surface area, and it would be a big wet pond, basically, is what you would create, a regional wet pond. So I know we're doing some neighborhood retrofits where they are condemning homes in some neighborhoods because they've got so many losses over time, and the value of those homes are basically diminished over time. Then most of those are already in the floodplain. You know, most of the homes in the study area here are not in the floodplain, but you're just outside of it. You know, so. There are certainly, we've done regional ponds where we've gotten FEMA brick grants, just like the elevation of NC-12, that's a FEMA brick grant, building resilient and infrastructure communities, I believe, is the acronym. But I know in Hampton, I don't know North Carolina specifically, but in Hampton they've got a regional pond near the Hampton Coliseum, if you're familiar with that area, where they did a BMP retrofit and expanded their wet pond there and elevated Armistead Avenue, and that was like a $10 million FEMA brick grant funded project. So you can do that, but it has to be a facility that serves more than just one neighborhood and one level of government almost. Like it would have to, and you could do a regional facility here. I'm not saying we want to go down that road, but that would pick up drainage from NC-12 and town property and residential property. And that would be something that, and if you could analyze that and say, this regional facility, even though it might condemn 10 homes, will alleviate flooding for hundreds, you know, and you can make that argument and submit for those types of grants, but.
And that's not something that we put in this draft?
No.
You know, a buyout program is certainly something that could have been considered as we went through this process. Did not have anybody jumping up and saying, what about if we buy a couple of the properties that are flooding? You know, so these are a menu of solutions that are going to assist. They are not going to prevent flooding from a Hurricane Matthew. But the 2-inch rain event that we get, it is probably going to help. It's not going to solve the major events. It's just going to help alleviate some of the flooding and hopefully keep your roads clear enough that you can get emergency vehicles down them and that you can get in and out of your house. And you know who I'm talking to because you know I've been to your property, so I know what your situation is. Yes, ma'am.
We live on a state road. Ours is state-owned. But the 2 streets ahead of us, I think, are private. Tuckahoe's private, Tides is but when the water comes, it starts up there and it goes to Georgetown. If the private roads decide not to do swells, and my street being a state does a swell, how is that going to help us if their water is still coming down the hill at us? Swells won't help us unless all the streets are done. Is that what we're thinking?
I don't like to think about it as finite like that. I mean, I think any volume, any storage volume added in the area helps for flooding for everyone, no matter where it is. Ultimately, all the water is getting to the same place, the groundwater table, eventually, and it's migrating either above ground or below ground. You just don't see it when it's happening below ground, but it's all migrating from high to low gradient, below ground or above. So any storage in any area of the town will help some. It will help more if the private residents decide to do swales alongside their streets too, absolutely. It'll be a better overall system that way. I just,
And we do have a community that has done a dry pond voluntarily in an area that we've seen substantial flooding, so.
I don't want to drone on too long, but.
Georgetown Sands left, but they did.
I don't want to drone on too long about this, but before I answer the next question. So you only have a few generators of runoff from these areas, these residential areas. You have roofs, which you're not going to get rid of that. There's people live in there. You have driveways that you can make permeable or make gravel or whatever that looks like to infiltrate the water better than concrete or asphalt, whatever you might have. And then the roads, right? And so I will say we just finished a project in Norfolk, Ohio Creek, and it's a resiliency project with a couple of stormwater pump stations. And basically we took the first rights of way in the city of Norfolk, city-owned roads, no state maintenance, and made them all permeable pavers. And it's pretty amazing how much of a benefit that created. Of course, that comes at a cost. Permeable pavers aren't cheap, but it has alleviated a neighborhood that was really prone to flooding in Norfolk. Alleviated a lot of the flooding issues there. Not all, but most. So that works for private streets too. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Another question. The test borings that you did in various locations in Duck, that information tells you what?
It tells us the infiltration rate of the soil, which if there might have been a peat layer or, I don't know, clay layer, shell layer, something that was preventing the water from getting from the surface through the soil itself, it would tell us if we had an issue like that in any one of the areas. We weren't able to get the borings everywhere exactly where we wanted because there's the trucks that do the drilling. You probably saw them around your neighborhood are pretty substantial, so we can't just wheel them up in anybody's backyard and use them without tearing stuff up. So we kind of had to keep the borings, get them as close to the low areas where we really wanted the boring as possible, but still within the limits of the street where the trucks could access. I mean, we were able to get some hand augers that were a little more remote, in a little bit more remote areas, but we didn't really find anything from that proved odd, or that basically every one of them showed that at the surface there was a lot of organics, which is translation, leaf and litter, tree litter and things like that, that have accumulated at the surface, which prevent the water from getting to the sand and out to the groundwater. That's really all we found with those. And they tell us the groundwater elevation as well, so we know, and we know basically what, that's kind of a known. With sandy soil, water migrates and reaches equilibrium below grade pretty easily. So we kind of know what that is, but you need that data to finalize an engineering report. So.
And you've cataloged that information.
Yes. Yeah, we have a geotech report that will be included in the final summary.
Yes.
Rosemary Gordon again, Amy Lane. So I can attest to how fast the water flows down Amy Lane to create what we call Lake Amy. And it goes probably somewhat underground into the water table. But it does get stuck at the bottom because there's so much debris that is collected. As a neighborhood, there's only 4 houses on the street. We know eventually we have to redo our road. So I'm trying to encourage that we pay a little bit more to incorporate some of these solutions for when we do the road. But I will say I'm a little disappointed that I mentioned this at one of the previous meetings in December, and it's not even included in the study at all. Out of the last 3 months, I've had maybe 4 days where the bottom of Amy Lane has been dry. There's a puddle there now. So I think even though our neighborhood is small, we have a greater number of impacts per days, including the post office won't deliver our mail. I even got supposed to be overnight. Well, it took 3 days. They wrote on my package, could not deliver because of the puddle. That was this week. So I think I'm a little disappointed in that it wasn't included, or at least mentioned anywhere. So I want that to go on record.
Yeah, that's, if it's outside of the study area.
But the impact for the amount of water that flows down, because I'm at least 50 feet high.
So,
I see the water going down Amy Lane, right down to the bottom of the culvert, and it sits because it's not going into the ground
it's on
fast enough.
the sound side of
It's on the
NC-12,
sound
right,
side,
if I
yeah.
remember correctly, and it's a pretty steep hill heading down, right? Okay.
Thank you.
I just want to emphasize, again, we made this clear in December. This is a focus area study, and there was not enough money to do the entire town. So this was focused on areas of repetitive loss and areas that were directly associated with discharge, with our stormwater discharge management plans. So that's where we started. The idea is that the solutions that are developed here will translate elsewhere. Obviously, unique situations will require different solutions. Amy Lane is a situation where a culvert under the road and a change in that entrance may alleviate that flooding altogether, or that standing water altogether. But again, this was 5 focus areas, and that's why it wasn't included in the report.
But there's a square foot cost in this report. So the final deliverable is a report. There's a square foot cost in these spreadsheets for permeable pavers, for bioretention, dry pond, what have you. That's a great planning level cost. So you can take that same unit rate of, I think we have $20 per square foot for permeable pavers, which is the highest end permeable pavement. You could take that and figure out the surface area of the road that you want to make permeable and get a budget number from that on any road. Same with the swales.
Other questions, comments?
So
When is the report going to be available? We'll be sending it to council in May, right? Yeah.
yes.
So I would imagine a week before, about. Oh, absolutely. I'm sure that we'll have our crackpot PIO over there, making sure that as soon as that agenda goes out, you all have the first word that it's out. Well, we just got word last week that Phase 4 of the RCCP grant program application is out, and that is due the end of this month. I'm sorry, the end of April 28th, I believe. So my expectation is we'll be evaluating these solutions and trying to figure out what in the monetary numbers can be completed. And I don't know where that's going to end up. That's above my pay grade. But I would imagine that Joe will be very involved in that and discussions with council. And once we come up with some kind of priority list, I suppose, we'll figure out, is the community that may benefit from this cooperative? Because there's got to be collaboration here. And I don't know exactly how all that will play out. But my hope is that we'll get some project off the ground probably this fall, potentially.
know you mentioned, this is Fran Newman again. I know you mentioned about state roads versus private roads. Soundsea Village is unique because we're the only gravel roads in Duck, which are all private. So when you're talking about looking for funding, are we approaching funding from the state or approaching funding from the grants through other organizations? And my second part of the question would be for one of the engineers. If we were looking at culverts, an engineer is pretty expensive. Do we get any support or any resources that we could look at what we could do from the gravel side, the road side of our community to help plan if culverts were something that we would be interested in pursuing?
So funding for state versus private roads and funding for this next phase are kind of two separate things. The next phase of this will have money from the Division of Coastal Management. Now, depending on what project ends up coming out of that, there may be a need to seek additional funding from other agencies. And a lot of times when you're like, I'll give you the road raising project. We've got funding from FEMA. We've got funding from the North Carolina State Department of Public Safety. We've got money from
Dare County Tourism.
Dare County, no, we got money from CCAP, which is Soil and Conservation for Dare County. We got money from NIFWIF, which is another federal agency. So this next phase of RCCP is, if we are awarded the grant, we'll definitely have money coming from the Division of Coastal Management, which is a state agency. That's usually requires a match from the town, and then if the project exceeds the scope of money that's available and with those two pots, then we would certainly be seeking additional funds from elsewhere. Now, where that comes from, I don't know yet. Again, that's above my pay grade. But a state road, you could certainly solicit NCDOT. The likelihood of getting money from NCDOT is probably slim, because they have like 5-year plans that they stick with, and they keep getting pushed back. So, just for road maintenance.
I guess the prioritization for private roads versus state roads.
I don't know. I don't know whether that'll play in or not. I think, when you talk about stormwater discharge management and whether we're going on a private road versus a state road to manage that again, above my pay grade. Who makes those decisions?
For the funding, I mean, once, all of the dust settles and the communities are clear about what they would like to pursue. Now, I'm going to assume that there's a limit on the funds that are going to be available, regardless of where they're coming from.
Sure.
Is it going to be sort of a first come, first serve?
I don't know yet.
Okay. So would it be an advantage then to kind of get our ducks in a row and come forward with a plan or a proposal?
I think knowing which communities want something to happen is certainly going to be helpful.
Okay.
And who would we be dealing with? Am I going to be dealing with the 4 of you from Soundsea Village, or I know Sand Dollar Shores has an HOA. I've got one representative from there, so those are answers that I can't give you right now.
On the technical side of the gravel there, so you may be thinking, hey, we have gravel roads and it's not asphalt, so that's a benefit. But what you have is crusher run, which is a base for asphalt. And over time, that doesn't give you any kind of perk. So it's not even infiltrating as much as the sand in the yards adjacent to it. I know you kind of think, hey, to somebody who's not an engineer maybe, or thinks that might be a benefit. It depends on the type of stone that you're using. So you'd want what's called an open graded stone instead of the crusher run. And there are solutions called gravel pave, which is what the pea gravel roads are back here to the park are made of. And you can see like the plastic rings. Sometimes when I talk about permeable pavers, that is one of the types of them. And you could look at getting rid of the crusher run and doing something like that, and then you would get a a large benefit in terms of the runoff reduction from it, so.
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember the neighborhood, there was a house being renovated or built
Ocean Crest.
that had a driveway with it was 57 stone, which is a bigger stone, and it just doesn't pack tight. And that's definitely an option, much better than the concrete or even crusher run.
And again, you mean, that's one of the reasons why we've got these cost spreadsheets in here, because, you know, the upfront cost for something like permeable pavers that have that separation, that have that gravel base without the fines, will cost more upfront, but the long-term permeability will be better than something like permeable concrete like we have out here. And it will require less maintenance. Like, we have to vacuum that every year. And if we don't, it ends up not being viable and not being permeable anymore. So there's the kind of things that we're trying to educate the community about as we move forward to try and find solutions for everybody. All right. Hearing no more questions? Sweet Teas has $5 drafts, everybody. I'll just let you know. Thank you all for coming. I hope that you will plan on attending the council meeting in May. And if you have any questions in the meantime, you know how to reach us.
Yeah, does she mean that?
Hey, I don't mean to.
I just don't want, where we're right here crossing over, I don't want her to be